Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and this week, straight from the comic books, that classic edition where Tony develops thigh control.
Today, I'm sure he learned that at the gym at some point.
Yeah.
Today,
Sure.
We're talking about minute 122, which begins with Eric's secret safety and ends with Quickdraw archery on the rooftop. Back on the show, we've got Team Exorcist Minute, Lester and Keenan. Hello, you two.
Hi, great to be here.
Hey, nice to be back.
Yes, we are thrilled to have you both back much later in the movie from when we first had our conversation with you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, last we saw this Thor and Iron Man were punching each other real good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now they're punching other people real good.
Yeah,
Right, right.
That's character arc.
That's development,
That's right.
That's right, we haven't seen you since The Forest,
which we couldn't see for the trees.
so long ago. It's like a different movie.
Germany or somewhere. But now we know where we are. We're clearly in New York City.
Or maybe Cleveland. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Under a bridge in Cleveland, yeah.
Some human city
Some city somewhere.
with buildings.
Right. Although we're starting technically on probably a stage with green screen as we're with Erik and this conversation between him and Natasha.
Yes.
And, we're coming in at kind of midway through his, we had a great cliffhanger at the end of the last minute with his reveal that maybe there is more to, what he had been doing. Like, maybe he did intend to be doing something. But now it kind of is like, okay, he's really not evil as he reveals he built a safety to cut the power source. And, it certainly feels like a script need at this point to come up with something to allow for them to be able to shut down this device. Do we buy into this? Does it make sense that his mental state would have allowed him to kind of plan this out?
It makes sense if you don't think about it, Andy.
Oh, right.
It feels emotionally correct, right? It's like, okay, he was in there and he was doing good. It's interesting that we don't get something with Clinton Barton that is the same, right? Because he's our hero, and not just a sidekick like Erik Selvig, but he doesn't get any sort of oh, well, I was in there, I did this or that for you all.
Although that's actually a really interesting point, because there actually was this really interesting deleted scene that, I don't know, Pete, we feel should have been left in the film. It was a conversation between Clint and Loki, and it really helps set up a lot of the other machinations that they had going on. But in that conversation, Loki also comments on the fact that he missed when he was at the very beginning after he first was taken his mentally. He says, you missed, I can't remember what the line was, but something like you didn't hit Fury. And Clint is like, well, maybe that's why, maybe there's something in there. Maybe there's something that kept me from hitting him. I can't remember the exact conversation, but it led to us thinking that there is something with this mind control where there is kind of some self-control that they're still battling internally. And if they had left that, there would have, this might have had that through line,
Yeah. That's something that Keenan and I have gone back and forth on in our show. We actually call it the Laurie Strode argument, because in the first Halloween movie, it's never mentioned that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister, and so within that movie, if that's the only movie that exists, then she's not. And our thing is if it doesn't happen in the movie, if it ended up on the cutting room floor, if it is in a deleted scene, but it's not if it's not in the movie that people go to in the theaters and see, if it's not explicitly said, then does it exist? And that's a question we've gone back and forth on many, many times, because I still believe that, Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister.
No!
No!
Really touched the nerve today.
And Darth Vader is Luke's father, right? But it's same thing with Episode 4, right? If Episode 4 is the only Star Wars movie that exists, then Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker have no relation to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe that. But technically, he's right.
Well, the most evil thing that Darth Vader does in that argument then is to let Luke and Leia kiss, right? That is worse than blowing up Leia's adopted parents or anything like that. That's really, really gross.
That's a disgusting point, Keenan. Thank you.
But then to bring it back to this movie, right? Like those little scenes, those little hints that there's something deeper going on. There's something, they are kind of like working behind the scenes. They are working for themselves. I don't know what argument we can make if we don't see it in the final film. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Then it is odd. Yeah. That Erik gets this like self-sacrifice. Like he was able to beat Loki's power, not just Loki's powers, right? But this is the Mind Stone. And so this is a mortal who's able to overcome that. Again, it's not the Mind Stone in this movie. It's the Mind Stone when we retcon it from later on. But yeah, so he gets this big moment. It's a little odd for me.
Do we have any, I'm trying to remember, do we have any hints before this minute, any like little setups that nod to this moment?
Not really. And that's the thing. And what's even funnier about it is Erik seems so excited about the science. Like every time, and let's remember, as a character at the end, like the post-credit scene at the end of Thor, we see him, it kind of hints at the fact that perhaps he's already under Loki's control in some capacity. And then at the beginning of this film, he's instantly mind controlled, and he always seems excited and like really passionate. Like he is obsessed with the Tesseract. Like Pete and I, we're always joking about the fact that if he didn't get mind controlled, he probably would have been doing all this anyway because he's so excited by the science. And so the fact that he's building this safety into it, suddenly it's like, oh, well, we just need that for the plot.
Right.
Well, and the fact that the other hint to it is another deleted scene between actually Clint and Loki, right, where we get the inference is that Clint is somehow aware and fighting the mind control, but because we've extracted all hints of the fighting the mind control from everywhere else, every other person who is mind controlled, this means much less. This little awakening.
Just a little thought experiment. I mean, what if we took out the mind control completely and just had him being this scientist? Because I love this trope. I love the idea of a scientist who is so obsessed with his work, his baby, that he might turn a blind eye for most of the movie away from, like all of the horrible things that are happening. And then in the end being like, no, I was blind. I need to, I need to have a heart.
Yeah. Alec Guinness on Bridge of the River Kwai, that sort of.
Oh my
moment.
God. Yeah. He was too busy thinking about whether he could. He didn't think about whether he should. Right.
Are we going to see any Avengers in this movie?
But it actually goes all the way back to what was Tim? What was his name in Hulk?
Tim
right?
Blake Nelson.
Tim Blake Nelson,
the
as
leader.
Samuel Stearns. Yeah. Exactly, is the leader. Like it's the same thing. Like talk about snatching David from the jaws of victory with that character. Like hopefully we get some play off of him. But this is that character trope that I also love. It's like it's sort of the non. Monster transformation version of Jekyll and Hyde. Like, I know that I have the ability to do this thing, and science makes me a maniac. Okay. It's why Oppenheimer exists, right? Like, it's that same vibe. We live through this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it speaks to how interesting it would have been to kind of further develop Erik in some capacity where he kind of became this villain. Like he became a villainous character further going down this road after this film. And I suppose there's a large part of it that this is a character who didn't come from the comics. He was created for the Thor film. And because of that, they felt, well, he's just going to be kind of a supporting player in the stories. We don't want him to turn into a villain or anything like that because it hasn't already been created in the comics. And, I suppose that's kind of the structure that they have. We pull real characters from the comics to be our protagonists and antagonists, and we might have to throw some supporting characters in there, but those aren't going to be the ones that lead in any capacity.
that to me seems like a perfect opportunity to like, you know, make commentary on human beings and yeah, our shortcomings and like
free of the comic baggage, frankly.
Yes, right. I mean, not to get dark, but like the Nazis weren't mind controlled.
Oh, is this the first drop of Nazis that we take Lester and coming in?
I regret to tell you, it's certainly not the first on this show.
Yeah, lest we forget, we had a whole film in World War II already.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Okay, good.
But what I'm saying is like the excuse of mind control, right? Like in our own history, we have human beings being human beings, and human beings can be really, really, really bad, and they can be selfish, and they can be, and they can act out of hate and fear, and they can be influenced and everything like that. Why not just have a commentary on, like, look at this man who is so obsessed with his scientific baby that he is willing to do this very, very human thing, and that makes a statement about us, and like we should, you know, do better. Oh no, he's mind controlled.
Well, you know, that brings up my other point, is that so if Erik can fight mind controls down somewhere, and maybe we have this extra textual information that Clint can as well, like, what does that mean for these S.H.I.E.L.D. guys and these NASA people who don't have any of that, and they just completely go along with it? Like, are they just weaker morally, or what is it about these two that allows them to break through the Mind Stone?
Yeah, it is a strange moment that we have here that, again, it's purely here just for the script, because we have to get this scepter so that Black Widow can shut down the Tesseract machine. And to that end, this is the next thing, like, they both look down at the scepter. We actually see the scepter laying down there on the kind of that patio outside of the penthouse. And again, it's like, it is not like there's a ladder down or anything. And I always wonder, like, exactly how does Black Widow find her way down there to get it and make her way back up over the next couple of minutes? Again, we see it. We don't necessarily need to actually show all of that happening in the course of an action film, especially as we're in the climax. It's just like they give us the pieces and we just have to assume that it all comes together in a way that works.
I have two things to say. Can I say two things? Number one, she got down there by the power of imagination. I can't believe you didn't see that. Number two.
Is that one of her secret powers?
Yeah, it's one of her secret powers, the power of imagination. Number two, I think this individual shot is bad because it puts the scepter as a line in shadow when your eye is drawn through the center of this little oculus piece down to the ground. And it makes you think that he is looking... He found the scepter all the way down on the ground, which is more ridiculous. It's a trick. It took me like 3 or 4 times of watching this movie to think, oh, the scepter's right there. And suddenly it's not as far as I thought it was. I thought she was running down the fire stairs all the way down the building to get the scepter and then running back up, because I think it's easy to miss.
Pete, until you just said that, that's what I thought too.
I am not alone.
This would have actually been a perfect moment to use that documentary style crash zoom that we've seen over and over in the film, where the handheld camera suddenly like zoom in right in on that scepter. So we're like, oh, that's what we're looking at, not the crane, the big yellow crane in the sunlight. That's
like sucks your gaze right to it. Right, it's a bad shot.
Well, let us to answer your question as to how she gets down there, Pete. I mean, let us not forget that her namesake is a spider.
She actually spins web.
Just imagine her just kind of like, you know, crawling away. Yeah,
but only when nobody's looking.
Right.
Only when nobody's looking.
She's shy about it.
She doesn't want to take anything away from Peter down the road.
Yeah, right.
As far as all this goes, the other thing that's funny about the scepter being here is when Loki crashes on here, does he notice that this scepter is lying right here?
That's how he dropped the scepter, right?
No, he dropped the scepter when he was fighting with Thor, and then he rolls off, hops onto his chariot, and then he's chasing her. So he's already been smashed by Hulk into the patio.
He's inside in a rubble.
Yes.
Well, luckily, everything's ended up in the same building. It's very convenient. It's in the heart of Midtown. That's a very convenient location.
I just keep imagining, like, when you keep saying patio, and I just keep imagining a family sitting down to breakfast, and it's like, honey, there's a scepter outside. Like,
don't
grab that for me, be a dear.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the evocative power. If we called it the lanai, it would be the Golden Girls out there. Yeah.
You're right, with an umbrella.
Right.
Exactly. Well, we go from this moment. We're not going to get to see her do her little secret spider crawl down to get the scepter. But we do cut. We're jumping over to another character. Now we're moving over to Thor. He is on a chariot and he's bashing some of the gunners. This is the first time we've seen him since Hulk punched him in the Grand Central Terminal. So now he's gone out. I don't know why. I guess he and Hulk went separate ways. I guess after Hulk punched him, he decided to go bounding off to do something else.
Andy, what's the rule of Thor? What do we always know about Thor? Thor always takes a lap. He always takes a lap.
So he found his way to this chariot. He's bashing these two gunmen. But it seems strange to me because he hits the two, again, the chariot, it's like the pilot is in the front with those weird like shoulder harnesses like strapped to its body or into its body. Again, we're not exactly sure. And then there's the two gunmen in back. Thor hits those two off of it. And then it seems like the pilot kind of loses control. I'm not exactly sure what happens here, but he kind of seems to be swerving as if he's about to crash into this building in front of them. Is that how you read it? Or does it seem like, or is he trying to shake Thor? I don't know. How did you all read this moment?
The physics is very interesting in this moment. Firstly, I'm going to say Thor, amazing hamstring control. Absolutely amazing. And actually, I'm going to answer your question with another question. Are his feet attached to that in some way? So that he doesn't just like blow off?
Right, yeah, you'd think. They are not.
By the power of Thor.
He's a god.
Right.
Like, he's a god. He's got god thighs and god feet holding him in place.
We should all be so lucky.
Especially god hammies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, just one little note. I think on the CG, the compositing is on this entire parade of sleds is, it's fine. But his hair is not. His hair gets longer. When you do the full body shot, I think his hair is like tangled now in the back, like waving behind him. It just feels too long to me. That's my only... I know Andy...
Oh, like the movie Tangled. Oh, no.
Yeah, the movie Tangled.
Like Rapunzel,
Andy has a real problem when we cover hairstyles on this show, but I have to bring it up.
I think there's generally compositing issues through this whole sequence, because even Black Widow in the last shot when she was up on the roof with Erik, she also, like, her hair has kind of a fringe around it. Like they couldn't quite get it cleaned up as well as they should have. So it's definitely a thing running through this minute.
That's why in the Fast and Furious franchise, they just make all their dudes bald. It saves $50 million.
So much easier. So much easier. That's like the Toretto. There's got to be like the Toretto budget savings line item, right?
Exactly. Right, but it does seem we never quite understand what the Chitauri are like, right? And it's kind of a cheat, I guess, to call it them Chitauri, because, like, as I understand it, they're not really like the Chitauri of the comics or anything, and they kind of have their own floating rules here. So, near the end, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead to minutes later on necessarily, but near the end, we sort of add like vampire rules, right? We kill the king vampire, and then they all seem to like power down. They're robots and they're symbiotes and all sorts of things. So yeah, the rules sort of, are what they need to be moment to moment.
Yeah, what we need it to, like how we need this hive mind, war machine kind of to work in context of the film. We're going to not be able to kill them all, so we just need to come up with something that makes them all shut down. Like, well, we've had comparisons already to the droids at the end of Phantom Menace, like very much the same thing. It's kind of a weird little weird little beat here.
Right. And sometimes they can, you say they're a hive mind, but sometimes they can work individually from each other. Sometimes one of them is the stupid one in the group and messes something up, right? So yeah, just, whatever we need. They're bad guys.
Yeah, right.
Generic bad guys.
Yeah, it's our generic bad army, exactly.
Right.
But lest we forget, they're also slaves, and they are also under the power of the maniacal forces of the other and his ilk. And this show is a Save the Chitauri and specifically Save the Leviathan advocacy podcast.
Yes.
Well, there we go.
Yes, because we're getting into this Leviathan scene here. This is our third Leviathan. Before we talk about the Leviathan, I just want to mention the building that the Leviathan is flying through. This is 320 Madison Avenue. And interestingly, and this is from MCU Location Scout, thanks to them for doing all this research, but interestingly, this is the in-universe address in the comics for the Baxter Building, the headquarters of the Fantastic Four.
Well, there we go.
And of course, now it is collapsing. So it's kind of funny. So much for that.
So that, Andy, that brings up another point I wanted to talk about. Again, not to get dark, but watching this minute, my mind immediately went to it took over 8 months to clean up the wreckage of 9/11, right? With people, working around the clock, nonstop, 24 hours, right? And the search and rescue. And it like 9+ months, right? And, everybody in and around, ground zero, just like walking to work every day. And, kind of like all they have to do is look in the direction of that space and just be reminded, right? Yeah. And it's something that we're going to be like reminded of forever, right? Even now, right? Like when we kind of have like a new, skyline, to see that isn't going to go away, right? And it got me thinking how specifically American movies are kind of nonchalant about, buildings falling down all over the place. Like compared to other countries, like in the UK, right? It was part of the culture for London children to be sent to a home in the country. Like that's how the Narnia books start. But people, like especially Americans, like I'm just going to speak for myself, might not be aware that the reason that the Narnia kids were sent from London to a remote country home was because their city was being bombed. And it seems like war and destruction and disaster and tragedy have a much more closer to home feel for other countries. And I wonder if that is a reflection on, I mean, we have so many Michael Bay, explodey building, city leveling movies where like the focus isn't that the city is being leveled. It's on the fight that's happening and the city is like collateral damage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then compare that to like Japan and Godzilla, which is about the tragic destruction of the human city, right? And maybe I'm answering my own question here, I guess, but like that was a direct response to the atomic bomb, right? Godzilla even resembles a mushroom cloud, right? But yeah, like that's a thing I've always been, I don't know, like what's the darker, more sadder version of fascinated with, but like
Lestering,
yeah, trademark right there,
yeah.
Right? Is what does the aftermath look like in these types of situations? Like is there like a huge cleaning crew, a memorial service, a vigil, or are we just supposed to look at that building and you've even given it an address and like a place in time and space? Like, are we just supposed to be like, oh, look at that building falling down? Or are we like, oh my God, like I hope nobody's in there? Or, like in these movies, like how are we supposed to feel? Like what are we supposed to like? How is it supposed to hit us? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been trying to develop a class because I teach at UNLV Film in Las Vegas, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and about disaster and survival. And because I am fascinated by those same questions, Lester, about like why is it fun sometimes to watch this type of thing? And so this is 11 years after 9/11. So I think this is like a sign that America had healed in some way, right? That we can have this, and we're not like completely stopped in the middle of the theaters. Like nobody walked out of the Avengers and were like, this is offensive. The way that they might have, that was sort of the question. Like the first major kaiju, buildings getting destroyed in New York was Cloverfield, which is a couple years after 9/11. It took a couple years. And then that movie is completely different in tone. It is fun, right? Because it's a horror movie, but it is a quite chilling sort of movie, right? It's not like what a great time everybody had there.
Yeah,
right. Well, because in large part, Cloverfield is focused on the people who would have been in 320 Baxter Building,
right? Exactly.
The 320 Madison, and I think that's actually really interesting that these movies writ large have such exuberance about the destruction part, and really short sheet the actually repercussions part. I mean, we get a little bit of it with Batman, with Bruce Wayne's perspective on the Superman Zod battle when we have we get to see him on the ground trying to help kids and get to see how mad he gets when he watches the buildings. But that's a pretty short bit, given the scale of the destruction. And so I think this movie suffers, and the MCU suffers, the same kind of short sheet mentality to the scale of destruction. It's really easy for them to, we have the brooding bits. We have Iron Man, real upset by, Infinity War Endgame. But how much of that is like do these movies need space for the cultural rebuilding of a city? Right. And we just had a guest on the show, and we asked him, who lives in the city, in New York City. And we said, what did you think when you saw this? He said, I don't really know. They blow up New York all the time. Like,
all the time.
Like, movies are just made to destroy New York and San Francisco. The Transamerica Tower is constantly getting clipped. Like, all of those things, like, they're icons. So we might as well blow them up.
Right.
And they definitely will deal with it in some capacity. And that's one of the interesting things about the kind of the journey that the MCU has taken over the years is like they keep coming back to the Battle of New York. And I mean, they touched on it obviously in some of the Netflix TV shows, even though they kind of relate, I don't know at this point anymore if they're in the multiverse or whatever, but still somehow. But then like even in Spider-Man Homecoming, you have Toombs is working in Grand Central Terminal, like dealing with the aftermath of its destruction after the Leviathan crashed into it. We have in the Hawkeye TV show, we see Kate Bishop and her family in the building and she's watching Hawkeye across the street. And so they are building these moments in to kind of have those little elements as we're kind of seeing it from different perspectives. But yeah, we haven't really come back to see just full on the perspective of, somebody like Beth the waitress, who had a little bit more of a personal story as she would have been journeying through it, going back to our conversation about deleted scenes and everything.
She is certainly an avatar.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. But the only one who really feels guilty about, so this is Thor, say, like, seeming to bring a Leviathan out of this, out of the former Baxter Building that's going to, I presume, get rebuilt or what have you. The only person in the MCU that I can recall who really feels bad about collateral damage is Wanda Maximoff, right? And then that's that's her villain origin story, really, if you think about it, about letting the bomb blow up in Lagos, and she's the only one who really gets affected by it. That it's actually part of her story, it seems. Unless you can remember any others.
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I'm sure there are others. I mean, it's interesting, actually. I mean, to a certain capacity, it's vague and non-descriptive as to specific instances. But certainly toward the beginning of this film, Bruce Banner seems very adverse to being part of anything because he doesn't specifically want Hulk to come out because he's afraid of its collateral damage. And so there is that element that's kind of built into him. But again, it's not pinpointed to any specific moment. I guess you could argue it's pinpointed to everything that had gone on in Harlem at the end of The Incredible Hulk. But it's vague. It's vague the way that he describes it. It's just, I don't want the beast out because of the damage he does, sort of thing.
Which is like property damage, I suppose, right?
Yeah, right.
So like property damage, I understand why that's fun, right? We get to see the transition of things and we get to see beautiful things and getting destroyed. And it helps us, not to get too wonky, but, people think that it tends to let us have a catharsis without having to go and destroy mailboxes ourselves, and right, just for the fun of it, right? But human, like it's impossible to see this Battle of New York and will it away that like, oh, everyone was fine, right?
Yeah, right.
As opposed to Hulk rampaging through Harlem, you're like, well, everybody was okay, all right? But this entire building's falling down. You would have to really be trying to convince yourself that, oh, everybody walked away, they're okay. They all went to work the next morning.
as we've learned from seeing all of our New York citizens running around, they tend to just either run in circles or actually run toward the incidents. And anyone who's in a building, they don't leave. They just go to the windows to watch. So we know everybody in this building is dead.
Things are going great.
Yeah, right. Well, let's talk about our Leviathan. So this Leviathan comes flying through the building right into this chariot and Thor. And Thor immediately gets knocked off and pretty much completely forgotten. I think it's funny that in this whole sequence we have with Iron Man, the Thor never comes back to like help fight this Leviathan that just like knocked him off. It becomes Tony's thing. So the Leviathan comes flying through the building, and I guess Tony was behind it, flying also through the building because we see him come through.
Must have been.
Yeah, and it's strange. I'm not exactly sure why he chose that route, but he did. And this is him in his "I'll try anything" phase as he's doing whatever he can to try doing all this. We see the Leviathan after this kind of do a belly flop on 67 Park Avenue, and that's about when Tony comes up with this idea of Jonah and the whale, and his new plan is put into action. This Leviathan, Pete, we've been talking about our friendly, sea cows of the skies, and how they're being controlled by the mothership, and they really have no say in the damage they're doing. And I just have to say, this Leviathan was probably running because Tony was beating it up and, and shooting at it
and firing lasers at it. Yeah, I would be terrified if I were a giant sea cow of the sky.
Yeah. It's horrifying. So sad. And then he's probably like Tony's flying at him, and he's just opening his mouth to say hi and
to say help me.
Yeah, help me.
It's crying for help me.
They actually, like, researchers say they have really, really large brains. They're actually very, very smart.
Yes, they really do. If it weren't for those teeth, they're just, you don't judge a sea cow by its teeth.
I have a playlist of Leviathan songs that helps me. It's weird that they didn't edit out all the screaming and the buildings falling down.
Right. Right.
That wakes me up a little bit.
Yes. Well, this Pete, you brought this up earlier as Tony gets this idea to fly at it and into it, because as we find out, he'll run out of power before he can ever penetrate this armor. He comes up with this idea, and you actually see in his HUD that he's arming they're called the thigh sidewinders.
Oh, so good.
Everyone's working on their thighs then. So this is Thor and Tony.
So much thigh work. Never skip leg day.
This is the leg day minute.
Right, exactly. He's got 4 of these thigh sidewinders that pop out of his little thigh containers.
Never not funny.
I know.
Say thigh again. Oh, come on.
And he flies into the Leviathan. And was the plan to just like break through its teeth if it hadn't opened its mouth?
Huh.
This is like the Millennium Falcon flying out of the meteor moon, right? You just dodge. I think that was the plan. Just dodge.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, he is our resident capitalist atheist, right? so he's quoting Jonah and the whale. Gets it all wrong. He's supposed to go in there and live in there for a couple of weeks and ask for repentance from his Lord. And it's the Lord. Yes, exactly. The Lord is supposed to allow him out once he is fully reverent enough, and that doesn't happen at all, Tony.
No.
Now he goes.
That's why he was asking. He was like, "Have you?
Right?
Are you familiar with the story of Jonah? Because I'm not.
I don't.
Jarvis, can you read me the book of Jonah?
Real fast. We got about 3 seconds.
Speed reading. Yeah. He flies in, and it's kind of well lit. Like we can actually see its esophagus as he's flying down into it. And then, I mean, it's just awful. Like Tony kills this poor Leviathan from the inside out, just blowing it up with all of his thigh sidewinders. And then I guess it's his comeuppance. He gets tossed out in a rather violent way from the explosion. He lands in Cleveland on Walnut Avenue. And I like to think of this as product placement corner because everywhere you turn, there is another sign. There's JanSport ads. There's Premier Parking. There's Farmers Insurance Group, Southwest.com, Metro News. There's also ads for the Jazz Festival and Farmers Market at Bryant Park. Lots of advertising.
And shawarma.
That's what I was thinking, like he was going to get up and he was going to look at Farmers Insurance. It's like, oh, good thing I'm covered.
Right, exactly. Yes. And as Pete just called out, yes, this is where our shawarma palace is. We can actually see it right here, and maybe we'll visit later.
Now we know how Tony knows about it.
Yeah, he saw it. Exactly.
The Baxter Building fell down, and all those people died, but the shawarma place is doing okay.
So, hey, no lines at shawarma. Stop. Lester made me do that.
So Tony gets swarmed by these Chitauri, can't quite get himself together. And this whole sequence with Tony and everything, I mean, how does it play for you all? Do you like the idea that he came up with? Does this plan work to kind of, thin out the enemy?
Certainly thins out that leviathan.
Mm-hmm. So we don't count them as an enemy on this show. Is that what I've been told here? They're our friends.
They're a vehicle and breeding vessel.
They're misunderstood.
The misunderstood.
This recalled the at walkers in Empire, where Luke gets he ties their legs together and they fall, and you kind of go, "Aw," even though they're like this death machine. You're like, "Oh, don't make them not walk."
Completely non-sentient death machine. It's actually
right.
Just a
ship. Like, the giant death puppies fell down. And these are the giant death. Whales.
Right. So you don't feel bad for the tauntaun being cut open to save Luke. It's just
that was necessary.
It was already dying.
It was already dead.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, please save me from the Star Wars nerds who will email me to correct me.
You try to survive 12 hours on Hoth without cutting open a tauntaun.
I wouldn't. I would stay home. I'd stay home at Alderaan and be neutral and see how far that...
Oh, yeah, good luck staying home on Alderaan.
Dead there too, dude.
Oh, no.
Well, we end this minute. Tony's getting buried by Chitauri, and we hop back up to the top of the roof where we find Hawkeye spinning around as a Chitauri jumps up behind him and he takes aim at it. That's where the minute ends. So, very busy minute. We've kind of been all over the place with our heroes, but it's certainly allowed for a lot of great conversation. Yeah, right. Quite a few. Well, Lester and Kynan, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, thank you guys for having us again.
Thanks for having us. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. We'll have you back in a couple days for minute 124. Definitely looking forward to that conversation. Before we head out, tell everybody about your podcast, where they can tune in.
Oh, yeah. You can find us on all the podcast places. We are The Exorcist Minute. We examine that movie, that iconic film, minute by minute. We just got finished with the scene, and if you know The Exorcist, you know what scene we're talking about. And that was a pretty interesting episode. I will say,
as a fan, I have to chime in and say that your exuberance for the level of profanity in that episode was extraordinary. When they talk about leaning in, this is what that means. Like, this is now the definition of leaning in on The Exorcist.
Yeah, we're an explicit podcast, and then we even had a trigger warning on it. I don't think we did enough. I don't think that was enough.
No, double or triple E. I think there was a discussion about how many E's you could give it.
Right. The Exorcist itself already needs, like, anybody talking about it needs to put an explicit on the beginning of their podcast. But then we got to the minute, right? The crucifix minute. And we were like, how do we even do this? Yeah. And we just decided to... Yeah, you'll just have to listen to it to see how we handle that.
Absolutely.
So that's our thing. We try to take really serious movies like The Exorcist and make them funny and try to find jokes there. And then we take really fun movies like The Avengers and bring up 9/11 and the Nazis and the nature of the relationship between man and Yahweh. Yeah, that's sort of our deal.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll have all the links for everything Exorcist Minute related and Lester and Kynan related in the show notes, so check that out, everybody. Remember, if you can't find the show notes in your podcatcher, just go to marvelmovieminute.com and you can get everything there. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Minute 123. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Andy, tomorrow, when Clint runs dry.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.